All right, I want to take a look at the development of the art of the great American artist, Mary Church. I think it was Linda Nochlin, the art critic, who said, or who asked the question back in the early 1970s, why are there no great female artists? I think that there are, and Mary Church was one of them. She was not only a great female artist, but one of the great American artists that America has ever produced, in my opinion. She ranks up there with Picasso and Jackson Pollock. Those are heavy claims, but let's take a look at the development here. This is her a few years before she committed suicide. She was born in 1991, and she committed suicide by shooting herself in the head in January of 2019. She had just turned 28 the previous December, on December 11th, so close enough to join the 27 Club, rather tragically, pretty much. I knew her for 4 years, from 2016 to 2019, and she attended art school at East Tennessee State University in the Department of Arts and Design there. Didn't get a degree, walked away frustrated after a good, I think she was there for 4 or 5 years. So let's take a look. Let's start at the beginning when she's 8 years old here, and this is her drawing in a very comic book type style at age 8. Already displaying for an 8-year-old artist quite a bit of skill. Here's another one from the same period. And notice that she's drawing giant monsters attacking cities. She is not drawing rainbows and flowers and dolphins like most young girls would be doing at age 8 properly. And she's already thinking in terms of apocalyptic images and monsters and so forth. Okay, that's at age 8. Here is her in the 8th grade at age 14 here, drawing what she called buildings of solitude. She very rarely titled her paintings. I was the one when she was still alive, who was giving titles to her paintings, and she was perfectly happy with my titles. But this is a rare example of her titling her painting. She also hardly ever signed her work. There's only a couple of examples of her doing that. This is interesting for a 14-year-old kid to make the sky green and to make the ground blue, which is the opposite of how we would normally think of it, and to make the buildings not only perspectively correct, but they have a kind of hallucinogenic quality, almost like a Van Gogh. Not that it's Van Gogh quality yet, but she'll get there. This shows a lot of promise. So the very next year she becomes a freshman at Gibbs High School in Florida. She's a Southern girl. She was born in Atlanta, raised in the South in various places such as North Carolina, and Tennessee, and then wound up she was in Hawaii near the end of her life. The last year of her life she was in Hawaii, and then came back to St. Petersburg, where she killed herself. But here we have a series of sketchbooks in high school. This is her freshman year, 2000, I think it's 06, 07. Here again is a rare example of a title up here. It says Fish Eyes. And it's Picasso quality already. This is the first page. She's age 14 here, and Dolly could not have done a better job. Right out of the starting gate here, I think this is incredible surrealism. And then this is the subsequent year. I've entitled this Flower Goddess. So it was drawn in another sketchbook, and these are large sketchbooks, large standard art sketchbooks. And here she's got a figure that has an emphasis. Notice the emphasis on the spinal column, and then there are 7 flowers. And I doubt very strongly that she had any awareness of the 7 chakras of Kundalini Yoga. So this may be an example of the Jungian collective unconscious at work, spontaneously producing mythological images through an artist who is sensitive to all things astral, which is essentially what the collective unconscious was, despite Jung's admonitions to the contrary. And Mary Church was an artist who was very much tuned into the astral plane, sort of like David Lynch in a way. I think David Lynch would have liked her works quite a great deal. And here again, this is probably in the summer between the sophomore and the junior years, or it possibly could be between junior and senior years. But actually down here, she has signed it. I've called it Atrocity, and she has signed it Mary Church and put 07 on it. So that makes her a 15-year-old kid drew this. The amount of detail, the eye for detail is incredible. And the sort of this is sort of, I interpret this as the junk heap of scrapped transcendental signifieds, as Derrida would call them, of the Western artistic and philosophical tradition. We're left by the time we get down to the second half of the 20th century, in the last decade and first decade of the 21st, with a scrap heap of junked signifiers that nobody knows what to do with. The other cool thing about this is she's given it a kind of almost an impression like this might be an eye over here and a mouth over here, as though it were alive. I think that's kind of interesting. And here I've called this one Biomechanical Giant, very large. These two are very large drawings. And this looks like she's obviously been influenced a bit by H.R. Giger. A pretty creepy looking being there. You can imagine it striding across the countryside like something out of a Clive Barker short story. And then here we have Marsyas in denim. This reminds me of the myth of Marsyas, who challenged Apollo to a flute contest and lost, and Apollo consequently had him flayed. This is astonishing. This is her third year in high school. I've entitled this book, sketchbook, Columbarium, naming it after a dovecote where they put all the dead bodies. And in a columbarium, they burn them down into ashes. And this looks like a very ashy looking creature. Very interesting. This is just a few pages in. I think it's page 33 of that sketchbook. And then here we have her a few pages later drawing kind of Picasso-esque type Harlequin. Very strong eye for detail. This is really beautiful. I've called this twone, which is a word I've taken from the first page of James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, whereby he means two in one, the two who are one. Metaphysically speaking, all pairs of opposites originate from a single fundamental source. But it also sounds like twin, and it also has the numbers 1 and 2. So fascinating. That's Picasso quality as far as I'm concerned. This is from a 16-year-old kid in Florida. Another Picasso quality self-portrait. I've called it self-portrait Astral. It looks like she is painting either her etheric body or her astral body. Very intensely spiritual this girl was. I published a series of her journals that are from her college days, and I've entitled it Earth Blood, The Journals of Mary Church, and that was published in 2025. I've taken it down temporarily from Amazon because I'm in the process of recreating it as a larger hardcover with full-color, high-res images, so it'll be a whole different experience. But the journals are extremely mystical, very intense, full of, she thinks she's being followed by spooky beings. She's constantly shifting in and out of the astral plane, as we do in the morning when we're waking up from dreams, things like that. This is in the same sketchbook, Columbarium, and I've called this one Biomorphica. It reminds me as though it can almost be a personification of the Cambrian explosion that occurred 570 million years ago, when all of a sudden we just get this explosion of these little tiny creatures, trilobites, and all kinds of crazy, strange-looking creatures, as though they were all coming out of the mouth, or are they all falling back into it? We don't know. There's an ambiguity there that gives it a kind of semiotic tension. And then this is great. This is just a few pages after that, and I've called this Anatomy Lesson to link it back to Rembrandt, to Dr. Tulp's Anatomy Lesson. This is as good as anything Bernie Wrightson ever did when he illustrated, he did a bunch of very highly detailed black and white illustrations for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and that's what this reminded me of. Clearly it's been done with watercolors and ink, and she's used a special kind of ink pen to do all this detail here. Pretty astonishing for a 16-year-old kid. And then a couple pages later, this one I've called Cadaver, just a variation on a theme. And this monstrosity I've called Razormouth, and the fourth of her journals from her senior year. I've entitled them Razormouth. And so these journals are very small. It's a moleskin sketchbook. So those of you who know what those small moleskin sketchbooks look like, and I have this on my wall. I just received it as a thin canvas art print yesterday in the mail. Now it's on my wall, and I've blown it up to 18. I think it's 18 by 24. It's pretty amazing, an astonishing image, I think. Clearly she has Francis Bacon in mind during this period, during her senior year. So this one was painted on a large canvas, and I called this one Baconian Death Dream because she's clearly dialoguing with Francis Bacon. And beautiful in the way the teeth glitter and gleam, just amazing. And then here we have, probably done after, probably in that summer between her senior and her freshman year at East Tennessee State University. I've called this one Red Orgy. It obviously is a play on an orgy. We know what Freud would say about this situation over here. Oedipus means swell foot, and the swell foot, of course, refers to the phallus. That's what we've got going on over here. I like the way she has tumbled the buildings as though it were kind of giving it a jazz sort of feel. It reminds me of something out of the 1930s Harlem Renaissance in New York. And then here we have Chasm, which looks like a portrait of the astral plane directly. These are spirits peering down onto the physical world, it looks like to me. And this one looks like someone is trying to forget, so I called it Forgetting. It looks like this is the ending of a relationship. Maybe a lover has committed suicide. And I like the way she's brought in these monoliths from 2001: A Space Odyssey and surrounded them with her and given it a kind of blue quality that is evanescent of Picasso's blue phase. Also note the details with the paint on the girl's body. Slightly suggests that she's been beaten or bruised, but we don't know. There's a lot of semiotic ambiguity in Church's art. This is probably from freshman year or sophomore year of college at East Tennessee State University, Department of Arts and Design. She does a series here which I call the Sky Blue series because they all feature the sky in them, and I've called this one Disease. When I was living with her, this was hanging up on her wall above her bed. It wasn't that large, but really cool, interesting looking. And these are from the same series. Floating blood cubes is what I've called these. And it appears to me as though she were doing a dialogue here between Euclidean geometry on the one hand, which is very masculinist and transcendental and exists in its own de-worlded abstract phase space that's totally separate from Gaia, the earth itself and its earthly intelligence, its morphogenetic properties. And here is the confrontation between the two. You might say Apollo and Dionysus, Apollo at the top and Dionysus at the bottom. In Kundalini Yoga, this would correspond to the top three chakras, and for Apollo, and Dionysus would correspond to the lower three chakras, which are all the energies that we have in common with animals. But the top three chakras need to incarnate on a physical earthly plane, and that's exactly what's going on here. I've left a few paintings out. I think the series is roughly 7 or 8 of them, and here it's been incarnated within the earthly Gaian overmind, you might say. It's like a creature out of Hesiod, but with Euclidean geometry included. Okay, and then this is a series that she did possibly in her junior or her senior years at college, which I've called the Qlippoth series. Qlippoth, not Qlippoth, from Kabbalah. She got this idea from Anselm Kiefer, who was one of her favorite artists. And Kiefer had, he does a process where he breaks shards of glass at his installations at La Rabaud in France to indicate the myth of the Shevarat HaKalim, which is the Kabbalistic myth of the breaking of the vessels, which means that when God's light came pouring down through the 10 Sephirah, it broke the vessels and shattered them all. A little bit like Semele asking to see Zeus in all of his magnificence, and she gets a thunderbolt in her face that shatters her, and Dionysus is retrieved and sewn into his thigh as a symbol of the paternal, what I call the paternal vulva, which is the patriarchal overtaking of the female power to give life. Not only does he do it with Dionysus, he does it with Athena, and then in the book of Genesis we get Eve being taken from the side of Adam. So that's the paternal vulva that comes in with what Jean Gebser, the German philosopher, calls the epoch of the mental consciousness structure that is patriarchal in its orientation and succeeds the mythical consciousness structure of the first generation of civilization with the Egyptians and the Sumero-Babylonians. And before that would be the magical consciousness structure, which is shared by all indigenous peoples around the world. and that involves shamanism and spell casting and so forth. So this is kind of interesting because she's got, there are no people in any of these paintings, and there are 7 of them here. And there's a mirror image here. It's very interesting. She might have picked that up from the opening frames of Stanley Kubrick's film The Shining, where we see the camera gliding across the water that has a perfect mirror image, a double, in other words, of the mountain range on both sides in this case. And this tunnel, which suggests something vaginal, perhaps, or is it a descent down into Avernus? Kind of creepy. It has an atmosphere of unease. Even though this series, and I've only put 3 of them here, is done in a kind of cartoonish style, it has an uneasiness and a kind of nightmarish feel about it that liberates it from the realm of any kind of pop art like cartoons. This suggests deforestation, and of course for her the Qlippoth were the industrialists. They are the demons who are against the light, which she identifies with nature and the power of the earth, which you can see when you read her journals, Earthblood, how extremely powerful that she thought the earth was and nature. I'll read an excerpt here. Death exhaled deeply into my lungs. I almost walked straight into it the other day. It's always just lingering there. It is not at all bad, though. Death means becoming a part of nature, becoming integrated with nature, which is perfect. All of my past lives. I was once an ant, a speck of dirt, a root, a leaf. I was once, and I will be again someday. It is not so bad. Death does not have to be scary. I look out into nature and think of what it must be like. Nature presents itself beautifully and flawlessly. In this sterile environment I live in, I long for something else. I think of wilderness as a sanctuary away from consciousness. This is not satisfying to me. I'm just continually disappointed. Will I ever be the same again? I don't know. I remember being happy. That was so long ago. I mean, true happiness, making a connection to another person. That feels like someone else's life now. What was that, anyways? I only look to the past with bitterness. And so on. I believe she's just come out at the end of a college relationship there. But that's a typical example of her blending her mysticism in with her nature mysticism against industrial civilization, which she did not like or trust. And you can see the series finishes here with an off-kilter mandala where the civilizational signifier is indicated by the road surrounding the house with a bare semblance left of what had once been deep woods. This is something. This is in that sketchbook in Earthblood itself. She drew this, and I've just called it "Sometimes I Feel My Head Is Missing," which is a direct quote from one of her journals. It may not be Earthblood. I can't remember which, but so that's a direct quote, and it reminds me of something out of a David Lynch movie. And here is now this one I have called Avernus. She's taken that tunnel from where the chair was sitting in right in front of the tunnel, and only this time she's got a river that looks like it's going downward into Avernus, which is what another name for Dis in the Aeneid. And this is the culminating image entitled "Deathbird Rising," from a series of about 10 images, 10 or 11 of them. that 10 or 11 of these images that were inspired by my book, The Age of Catastrophe, where I looked at a series of global accidents all around the world, including Bhopal and Chernobyl and the big oil spill, the BP oil spill, and all of these kinds of accidents that I see as getting more and more larger and larger and larger. And then we had COVID after the book was published in 2012. And I had just written The New Media Invasion the year before that, and then after it I wrote in 2013 Art After Metaphysics, where I sat down and examined the works of a series of contemporary artists like Joseph Beuys and Jackson Pollock, and all the way down to Anselm Kiefer and Anish Kapoor, great artists like that. And then so here we have this sequence. She's made up a sort of alternate universe with these creatures that have they have skeleton bodies and their heads look kind of like wolf snouts. They don't have wings until this guy emerges in this final image after they suffered through a gigantic flood. that has wiped their civilization out, and then they go through a transformation, and then they produce that and this, which I've entitled The Explosive Power of a New God, which is a reference to Heidegger in his Der Spiegel interview. One of the last lines of it is, he says, "Only a God can save us." And it is clear here that Church intends for this to be the transformation of this alternate society and the creation of a new God. Now, I watched her draw this. I sat on the couch. She drew this as an illustration to my poem Centaur, which is in my collection, These Things We No Longer Are, which is a collection of poems that I have done all the way since college. So they're all collected in there. And she liked the Centaur poem and also the one called Autumn Leaf. I don't think I've reproduced Autumn Leaf here, but I watched her draw both of these, sitting on the couch, just all this incredible detail. She would go into a trance and just draw for hours. The detail is just amazing. And then this is her Hawaiian period. After we broke up, she went to Hawaii in 2017 as an exchange student to work on various different farms. And then she was moving into what I call her Hawaiian sequence, which is her final collection. This has a very cosmic William Blakean feel to it, so I entitled it Morphogenesis. It looks like it might be that she just intended it as abstract art, but it looks to me more cosmic than that, and this one certainly is more cosmically definite. This is I've called this the fourth world, as a reference to both the Hopi, who say that we have come up from 3 previous worlds and we are now living in this world. They like to go by their original name, Hisatsanam, not Hopi. And so it's a reference to that, and also to Rudolf Steiner, who has 4 separate epochs that he sees the cosmos having been created in, or at least our solar system: the Saturn epoch, the Sun epoch, and the Moon epoch, all of which take place only on the astral plane. It's only when we get to the fourth world, that of the Earth proper itself, that we get physical elements coming into being that assemble, or are the bricks that spiritual beings use to assemble the world. And here this looks like the Earth itself is finally solidifying. This reminds me, I've called this compression. It reminds me of some of the sketches of Jackson Pollock. If you look back into his early sketchbooks, he does things like this. I'm not sure if Church was familiar with his early stuff or not, but that's what it reminds me of. Again, the detail is astonishing. And this lovely thing, this is one of the only ones that I actually bought from her when she sent it to me when she was living in Hawaii. I've called it Iris, as a reference to the rainbow goddess for obvious reasons. Picasso could not have painted a better painting. I don't care what anyone says. He just simply could not have. This is astonishing. I love the hallucinogenic qualities that she's given it. Van Gogh could not have done a better job. We are here at an artist who is 27 years old, who is already fully mature as any artist has ever gotten, whether in Europe or America. And this is what I've called jungle morphica. It's like a cross between abstract art, but there's also jungle here. You can see the Hawaiian jungle, the hibiscus. You can see all the different vegetation and so forth. So she killed herself shortly after this when she returned to St. Petersburg. I think it was in October of 2018. Bought herself a .38 caliber handgun. She had gone schizophrenic. We had resumed our relationship over the summer, but she had gone paranoid schizophrenic on me and was calling me Seth and all of these weird things. And she thought someone was stalking her, so she bought a gun, and her mother allowed her to keep it. And then she shot herself in the first or second week of January of 2019. Well, I tried to talk her out of it over Gmail, and she would not tell me where she was at. I did not know at that time whether she was in Hawaii or back to St. Petersburg, where she actually was living with her parents. And I was frantically trying to get a hold of her parents. I lost all the communications in the interim, but it was too late, so she pulled the trigger in mid-conversation, as I found out a couple hours later after hearing nothing back from her. And then her mother told me she was at the morgue. Yeah, that was very cheerful. One of the worst nights of my life, that's for sure. So I'll end there. I'm losing my voice anyway. So that's an overview of the art of the great American artist who also not just did painting, but she also she also did three-dimensional sculpture as well, and also installations, most of which has been lost. She had a tendency, she was bipolar and had a tendency, like Van Gogh, say, to destroy her works. So there are a lot of images that we have, digital images of, but not the originals for. So I guess their ontological status will have to be debated. We're in hypermodernity now, not postmodernity. Those days are gone. And we're living under new conditions of digital technology, not analog electronic, but digital technology with artificial intelligences. And these have all been high-resed by an artificial intelligence, which is why they look so amazing. So all of these things will have to be debated by art critics and media theoreticians under these new conditions, the ontological status of the art and of the artist and her art. All of these are available on Shopify. I've created a Shopify page where you can purchase art prints as either posters or framed posters, but also as thin canvas prints on a wooden frame, which is my preferred format because it lasts longer. It's more expensive, but it lasts longer, and the resolution of the image is much better. So I'll put the link for that down below so that those of you who are interested in shopping there can go on there. Okay, I'll leave it at that for that brief overview of the life of the extraordinary American artist Mary Church.